Happening now, an urgent manhunt is underway for the Texas man suspected of using an AR-15 to kill 5 neighbors. And so far, police do not have any leads. We have the latest on the search.
Also this morning, a mess in the Midwest. Floodwaters are rising along the Mississippi River, putting hundreds of communities at risk. We'll show you how they're preparing for the worst of that flooding. Plus, a look at the major weather issues across other parts of the country, including several tornadoes.
Happening now, more help for Americans trapped in war-torn Sudan. Armed drones and a Navy ship are now on the coast trying to evacuate U.S. citizens caught up in the fighting. We have the latest on those efforts.
And breaking this morning, a major development tied to growing concerns in the banking industry. Federal regulators are seizing control of First Republic Bank and selling the bulk of its operations to J.P. Morgan. We'll explain what that means for people who bank there and the impact on the wider economy. That's coming up later this hour.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Savannah Sellers. So happy to be back with you for real now.
So glad to have you back. And I'm Stephen Romo, filling in for Joe Fryer today.
That's right. And we're going to get to all that news we did in just a moment. But we begin in Cleveland, Texas, where officials are racing to find the man suspected of killing 5 people late Friday night. At least 200 officers are involved in the massive search to apprehend 38-year-old Francisco Oropesa. Officials are offering an $80,000 reward for any information that could lead to his arrest. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson joins us now from Houston with the details here. Hey, Priscilla, good morning. What do we know about the manhunt at this point? I mean, we said officials don't have any leads here. What do we know about how they're planning to tackle this?
Yeah, Savannah, Stephen, good morning. The FBI is now taking the lead in this investigation, saying that they have 0 leads and that the suspect could be anywhere by now. They did announce that $80,000 reward in the hopes that it could lead to a tip as they are working for any potential break in this case. And as you mentioned, authorities have said there are more than 250 officers on the ground in that area, just scouring that neighborhood. We saw them yesterday going door to door, talking to neighbors, searching homes and cars, again, looking for any potential leads. And investigators here are making it very clear that the longer this search goes on, the harder it may become to track down this suspect and ultimately apprehend him. Savannah?
And Priscilla, was there ever a point where police maybe thought they were closing in on the suspect's location, or they did kind of have a handle on this before so much time passed?
Yeah, Savannah, when I spoke to the sheriff in San Jacinto County on Saturday, he was very confident that the suspect would be arrested by the end of Saturday. But what we learned is that officials had believed they were tracking the suspect in a wooded area about 2 miles from the crime scene. They had dogs and officers on horseback and also drones up looking for this suspect. But ultimately, all they found was a cell phone and clothing that had been abandoned. And after that, the dogs lost track of the suspect. They lost his scent. And so now they are working with the suspect's wife. We're told that she is cooperating with authorities. And they also believe that the suspect may begin reaching out to friends. And they're hoping that any of that could lead to a tip that will get this guy arrested. Savannah.
Priscilla, Stephen here. I had a question I wanted to ask about the victims in this case. We know several people were in the house at the time of the shooting. Some of them survived. What else do we know?
Yeah, so we know there were 10 people in the house at the time of the shooting. 5 of them survived, but there were 5 who were killed. And we are learning the names of those victims, including Jose Casares, Diana Velasquez, Julissa Rivera, Sonia Guzman, and her 9-year-old son, Daniel Guzman. And I spoke to William Garcia, the father of Daniel, and he told me that his son died trying to protect his mother. He says that when the son saw the mother fall, her body fall, he ran towards her, and that's when he was killed. And the father was in the house that night and was able to escape. And we also know that there were 3 minors who were found covered in blood. Authorities say that some of the deceased loved ones were lying on top of those minors and may have shielded them and saved their lives. Savannah, Stephen?
Oh, my goodness. Just some hero stories that you hear emerging there, but just so heartbreaking for this family. Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much.
All right, now to our other big story this morning, the severe weather that's sweeping across the country, causing damage and major flooding. Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is tracking the storms, and we'll have the very latest there. But first, NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch is in Iowa along the banks of the Mississippi, where they are seeing some of the worst flooding in 15 years. Jesse, good morning to you. So what exactly are you seeing there, and do we know when things could get better?
Yeah, Stephen, good morning. So we're expecting the river to crest here, so to hit its highest point here in Davenport around midday today. But the water's going to stay up at that elevated level until tomorrow sometime. And even as it drops, we're expecting flooding to remain in Davenport through the upcoming weekend. So we've got a long road of cleanup ahead of us here in Davenport. You can see behind me what should be Main Street has turned into an extension of the river, essentially. Water has been spilling over here for days. They've put up a temporary wall here in downtown. Scenes like this along the stretch of the riverfront here. And we've also seen some people's homes encircled in water, with some water getting into homes. Unfortunately, I talked with a family yesterday in the area, and they said that it's mostly minimal damage in their basement, though. So by and large, what I can tell you is when we talk to people here, the overwhelming sentiment seems to be this is just part of life out here, and it's a trade-off for people that is worthwhile to be able to have the view of the river and the beauty of the nature on their front doorstep, essentially, most of the year. And then, of course, you have to deal with this every once in a while.
Hopefully that temporary wall you showed us actually holds there, Jesse. So you mentioned those residents. Do we know how they're dealing with this? Are people trying to evacuate, or are they choosing to ride it out in their homes?
So we've come across multiple people who are staying at home. Some people are walking in waders back and forth. Someone said they're taking their pets out on a kayak so that the pets can go to the bathroom because they can't walk them out. There are other people, though, who are still living in their homes along the waterfront, but say that they're not risking it by trying to walk through with waders. They can't take a car through there. They say they're going by boat. People are riding in boats through neighborhoods. So that's how people are getting back and forth. But again, this is something that people who live here are used to, and they've found a way to make it work.
Wow, startling to see those pictures. All right, Jesse, thanks for the update.
And now let's get to meteorologist Michelle Grossman, as we mentioned, with the latest forecast for this first week of May. Yeah, in case you didn't know that, waking up, it's a new month today.
It's a whole brand new month. Hey, Michelle.
And I love that it's May. We're getting so much closer to summer. And good morning to you guys. And we are looking at the chance for some rain to start out this May. We had a soggy Saturday, a soggy Sunday, and we're going to start out this week soggy as well. Let's talk about the river flooding first, because we're kind of touching upon what Jesse said. We are concerned about the river flooding. We are concerned about that over the next few days. And really, this is going to be a duration event over the next several months, because we still do, even out west, have a lot of snowpack that needs to be melted. So as we look at these, all these dots sort of indicate river gauges. So where you see the brighter colors, the pinks, the purples kind of color, we're looking at major flooding, mainly in portions of Iowa. But this extends all the way from Minnesota down through portions of Missouri. So again, another big story that we're watching. This is the second big story. We're watching a spring storm. We watched it all weekend long. It brought severe weather to portions of Florida, also Virginia Beach. No severe weather today. That's the good news. But we're going to be really soggy. Also looking at the chance for some snow up to 2 feet in some spots. That would be into the UP of Michigan. We do have a winter storm warning. That is in the pink. The white is your winter weather advisory. That includes the Appalachians as well. And then back to the east in portions of New England, we are looking at flood watches. And we do have quite a bit of rain falling. We had quite a bit of rain over the weekend. 3 to 5 inches of rain fell. We're going to add 1, 2, 3 inches on top of that. And this is why. This is the swirl. This is an area of low pressure. It's sort of that sit and spin that you saw when we were, that toy that was used when we were little. Some of us, I'm a little bit older than most of us, but back to the west, we're looking at heavy snow falling on the backside of this storm system. The white is the heaviest snow. So again, could see up to 2 feet there. Where you see the blue, that's the snow. The pink is sort of the mixed precipitation, so rain and snow mixing in. And then we're looking at heavy rain falling, the brighter colors, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. That's where we're seeing that heavy rain falling. This is the setup. We have an area of low pressure that will continue to spin very, very slowly. It's going to bring in that snow. It's going to bring in the rain. Also really gusty winds. So winds gusting up to 45 miles per hour. That is today. Then tomorrow, moving ever so slowly into the northeast. Notice all that rain still in portions of the interior northeast. Also New England. Some could be heavy at times. We're looking at snow too. And then guys, Wednesday, we're still looking at a soggy day. So here's my advice, because this includes us. We're going to need the umbrella. We're going to have a little bit of a break this morning, but keep it handy for tonight, tomorrow, and Wednesday.
Oh my goodness. We didn't get enough the last 2 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it.
I normally am totally fine with it. I had to drive like 4 hours somewhere in Pennsylvania and then back. I was like, yeah. And my dog, she sees a windshield wiper. It's the end of the world. She's got so many issues. Yeah, so that's fun.
Don't we all?
I know.
Very much so.
My husband always says, we adopted a dog just like you, anxious. There you go. Thanks, Michelle. Good to see you. All right, well, now to Sudan, where the U.S. military is helping hundreds of Americans escape the war-torn country. A second convoy of Americans arrived at the port of Sudan yesterday as part of the evacuation effort. NBC News foreign correspondent Ali Arouzi joins us now with the very latest here. Hey, Ali, good morning. Tell us, what is the latest on this evacuation effort this morning? We're learning about an email from the U.S. Embassy that says the government is not planning any further convoys. So tell us at this point, is this one safe? Did it safely make it? And what does this mean for those that are still there?
Hey, Savannah, that's right. Well, the ones that left Khartoum on Friday night have made it safely to Port Sudan, and then from there they're going to be transported by ferry to Jeddah. And that was a long convoy of around 12 buses carrying hundreds of Americans, and by all accounts, they are safe. But as you mentioned, the State Department has sent an email to other U.S. citizens that are still in Sudan saying that for now there are going to be no more evacuations, that if that changes, that they will get in touch with the people on the ground and give them details of how that will be planned. But for now, it's not on the cards, and they've advised people that are there right now to make their own way to Port Sudan if they can, and then from there they can get onto commercial ships or ferries that will then take them to Jeddah, and in Jeddah there will be State Department personnel to help them with the next phase of their transit. But basically, they're on their own, anybody who's there right now and wants to get out of the country, because there are no more evacuation plans for the time being.
Yeah, so that's the messaging from the U.S. Embassy. Conversely, Ali, we know the U.K. government did extend evacuations by adding an additional flight. Tell us about that.
That's right. They had initially said that their flights were finished on Friday night. They'd flown out a flight north of Khartoum, and they said that was it. There wasn't any more demand, but evidently there had been more demand of Brits and other nationals that the Brits were helping get out. So they have designated another flight for today. They've told everybody that needs to get onto that flight to be in situation by noon local time in Sudan. And that may be the last British flight out of Sudan. And the British, although they had a very late start on evacuating their citizens, they now said that they've evacuated over 2,000 citizens on 23 flights. And they say that's the longest and largest Western evacuation that's been rolled out since the conflict started in Sudan. So there was obviously a need to get more Brits out after they extended that next evacuation flight.
All right, Ali, thank you for the latest here. We know you'll stay on this for us. Thank you so much.
Well, we have a new development in the civil rape case against former President Donald Trump this morning. Trump's lawyer filed an 18-page motion to request a mistrial in the case just a week after the trial started. In that motion, Trump's lawyer accused the court of, quote, pervasive, unfair, and prejudicial rulings. E. Jean Carroll is the woman who came forward in 2019 with an accusation that Trump raped her in a department store in the mid-90s. Trump has consistently denied those allegations. NBC News correspondent Ron Allen joins us now in New York City with more on this. So, Ron, what can we make of this sudden request from Trump's lawyer, Joe Tacopino?
Well, basically, they're arguing that the judge has been unfair. The judge has ruled in the plaintiff, E. Jean Carroll's favor more often than not. They're complaining that the judge has not allowed them to question her as aggressively as they would like to. That's the sum and substance of it. The likelihood of this, the judge agreeing that he himself has been unfair is unlikely. And this is perhaps, some experts might say, the defense setting themselves up for an issue that they can appeal sometime down the road. So that's essentially how that's being seen at this point. Not unexpected. The judge is probably going to just dismiss the effort to declare a mistrial and end the trial now, and we'll continue with cross-examination of Carroll when the testimony resumes this morning.
So, Ron, E. Jean Carroll actually took the stand last week to be cross-examined, and she's supposed to take the stand again today, I understand. So how did it go last week, and do we know what to expect today?
Right. We're expected for this to continue. At the end of the last session, Donald Trump's attorney, Joe Tacopina, said that he was about halfway through cross-examination, which would mean that he has several more hours to go beginning today around in a short while. We expect that to get underway. And it's been very feisty, very aggressive, very emotional at times, a lot of back and forth, because this is the heart of the former president's case. His attorneys are trying to prove that she is lying. They say that a lot of the things that she said about what happened at Bergdorf Goodman back in the mid-1990s is simply unbelievable. They've pressed her on issues, for example, like she can't even say exactly when this happened, the month, the date, the year. So we expect that line of questioning to continue.
All right, more to come today. We know you'll stay on top of it. Ron Allen, thank you.
We are less than 2 weeks away from Title 42 expiring. That's going to mean the U.S. is bracing for an increase of crossings at the southern border, because Title 42, that was the pandemic-era policy that allowed migrants to quickly be expelled without processing their asylum requirements. That's set to expire on May 11th. Under the current policy, more than 2.7 million migrants have been expelled since 2020, again, related to the pandemic. Well, in preparing for the increase of border crossings, the Biden administration announced it would set up migrant processing centers in Latin America to screen those looking to migrate into the U.S.
Well, the clock is ticking in Hollywood. If a deal is not struck by midnight, a walkout could have a huge impact on your favorite movies and TV shows and more, and could also affect the economy. NBC News correspondent Marissa Pata explains.
Yes, so much has changed in the last 15 years since that last writer's strike, especially with technology, and especially when you look at this new era of streaming.
Hollywood is holding its breath as signs of a writer's strike are written across Tinseltown.
We are really prepared to do what we have to do to get a fair deal.
In a standoff with the Alliance representing the studios they write for, nearly 98% of Writers Guild of America members support a strike, saying the vote represents collective solidarity and demand for meaningful change.
We want enough money to make a basic living doing what we love, which is writing. Profits for the companies are up. The cost of living is up, and payment to writers is down.
The Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers has remained largely tight-lipped, saying in statements their goal continues to be to reach a fair and reasonable agreement. But if they don't,
it is going to have a massive ripple effect that you could borderline call a tsunami effect.
It's not only writers affected. Those in front and behind the camera will likely stand in solidarity, refusing to cross the picket line, bringing production to a grinding halt. Late-night TV would feel the impact first, just like the last time writers went on strike 15 years ago, when Stephen Colbert famously quipped,
"I got a problem here. There are no words in my prompter."
Last week, Seth Meyers showing his support.
What the writers are asking for is not unreasonable.
Writers argue there's a lot on the line.
If you want to put a big word up in the sky in flaming letters, it's streaming.
Streaming has changed not only how movies and TV are viewed, but how they're made. Fewer episodes, longer production time, and less pay, which writers say is not sustainable.
We can break it down very clearly. More money, more information, more security, and less freebies.
And make no mistake, halting Hollywood can be expensive. During the last Hollywood strike 15 years ago, that was a cost in the billions. Back to you.
Wow.
Hard to believe it's been 15 years. Marissa, thanks so much. Welcome back. House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is in Israel with a bipartisan congressional delegation to mark the country's 75th anniversary. This morning, McCarthy will become the second Speaker of the House to give an address to the Israeli parliament. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez is in Tel Aviv and joins us now with the latest. Raf, good morning to you. So what is on Speaker McCarthy's agenda while he's in the country?
Stephen, good morning. As we speak, McCarthy is meeting Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. These are two men who have known each other for a long time. They are meeting first one-on-one and then with that expanded delegation of both Democrats and Republicans from the House. And Israel, of course, is the #1 recipient of Israeli military aid, which has to be approved by Congress. So Netanyahu makes a real point of maintaining relations not just with the White House, but also with congressional leaders. And then, as you said, McCarthy is going to become only the second American speaker in history to address the Israeli parliament, the Knesset. The first was Newt Gingrich back in 1998. Those are the business parts of this trip. There have also been a number of ceremonial functions, McCarthy visiting the Western Wall in Jerusalem, and also Yad Vashem, Israel's Holocaust memorial site. Stephen.
Well, Raf, we know there are some tensions between the U.S. and Israel. President Biden has said he does not plan to invite Prime Minister Netanyahu to the White House anytime soon because of his government's controversial judicial reforms that have sparked so much outrage. So has that issue come up at all with Speaker McCarthy?
Yeah, it sure has. McCarthy telling a right-wing Israeli newspaper that if President Biden doesn't hurry up and invite Netanyahu to Washington, McCarthy is going to do it himself. He'll invite the Israeli prime minister to come speak to a joint session of Congress. Now, Netanyahu, for his part, needs to tread a little bit carefully here. He has been burned in the past, accused of meddling in American politics by being too close to the Republicans. Back in 2015, he really kind of defied President Obama by speaking to Congress and opposing Obama's 2015 nuclear deal with Iran. He was also accused of being too close to President Trump at times. And this question of an invite to the White House has kind of become a domestic Israeli political issue. Some of Netanyahu's opponents are pointing to this lack of an invite and saying Netanyahu has so mismanaged Israel's relationship with its most important ally that he can't even get an invite to the White House, something that is usually traditional for an Israeli prime minister to secure. So we will see if an invite ends up coming either from the White House or from the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue from Congress sometime soon. Stephen.
That invitation become quite controversial there, Raf. And speaking of what's behind this tension, the judicial reforms, where do they stand right now? Does Parliament plan to take up that issue this session?
It is a really good question, and only Netanyahu really knows the answer to it. Back in March, he hit pause on these very controversial judicial overhauls in the face of these massive protests. He promised at the time that he would pass the overhaul in some form by the end of this session of Parliament, but no one really knows at this stage whether he's going to go through with it or not. There are negotiations going on between Netanyahu and the Israeli opposition to try to find some kind of compromise. Netanyahu is under major pressure from his right-wing supporters to make sure this overhaul does go through. There was a big march in Jerusalem last week, but he's also under major pressure from liberal Israelis who in their hundreds of thousands have been out week after week calling for an end to this overhaul. Stephen.
All right, more to come on that. Raf Sanchez, thanks for the update.
Well, we're back also with new developments on the war in Ukraine. So many in the country woke up to the sound of air sirens this morning after Russia launched its second missile attack in 3 days. Now, this escalating violence comes as Ukraine is preparing its counteroffensive attack against Russia. The move is set to mark a new turning point in the war as Russian military officials brace for impact. NBC News correspondent Ellison Barber joins us now from eastern Ukraine with the very latest. Hey, Ellison, good morning. So let's start with this latest missile attack. What can you tell us? What cities were hit?
Yeah, Savannah, before most people would even consider waking up, almost every single region in this country was under an air raid siren. This attack started around 2:30 a.m. local time. Ukraine's air defense says they intercepted 15 out of 18 Russian missiles. But in the city of Pavlohrad, there a missile strike was not intercepted. The regional governor says in an attack there, 34 civilians were injured, among them 5 children. We're still getting a sense of how much damage took place there and in other cities. But in that region, that's the Dnipro region, the regional governor says a number of homes and residential areas were severely damaged by the blast. Again, 34 people, all of them civilians, injured, and among them 5 children. Savannah.
Ellison, this comes just days after 23 people were killed in an attack in the city of Uman. Tell us the latest there. How are families handling that? What are funeral service plans?
I mean, we were on the ground there and watched as rescuers searched for hours, hoping to find any sign of life in that attack. The 23 people who died, they all lived in the same apartment building. Among those 23 who died, 6 of them were children. This weekend, their families, some of those children, they began to say their final goodbyes. You look at some of the images that came out of this, and it's gut-wrenching. 2 of the children who were killed were injured. Were buried, rather. One of them, a 17-year-old named Hirushara, another an 11-year-old named Sophia. And some of the images you see at one point, a child wearing an orange jacket. He has a little snow-type beanie on his head, and he's crying. That is the brother, a 6-year-old, of the 11-year-old who was killed in the attack. A lot of people from the community came to pay their respects to the people who passed. This is a small city. When we were speaking to people on the ground, they described it as very close-knit. In terms of that attack, Russia's Ministry of Defense claims that they were targeting military-related installation. UK's Ministry of Defense says it's possible that that was the goal, but Russia often strikes at what they consider to be perceived military necessities rather than considering what might be civilian areas. We asked every single person in Uman if there was any sort of military-related activities happening in this building or the buildings around them. Everyone we spoke to said no, and everything we saw there indicated this was a highly residential community with just apartment building after apartment building there. And one thing worth remembering when Russia makes this claim that they were targeting military-related structures, that part of the Geneva Conventions, the rules of war, is that parties involved in war are supposed to try and avoid civilian casualties. And we see time and time again, Russia does not do that. Savannah?
Absolutely. Oh, that video of that little boy with the hat on that you were mentioning is just so heartbreaking. Ellison, we've only got a couple seconds left, but can you quickly tell us what we know about this planned counteroffensive attack?
Yes, it seems like Ukraine is getting closer to launching that highly anticipated spring counteroffensive. Over the weekend, we saw a massive fire at an oil depot in Crimea. That's territory Russia has occupied since 2014. The spokesperson for the commander of Ukraine's Southern Command, they confirmed that this attack was carried out on the oil depot in Crimea in preparation for their counteroffensive. Military officials won't say exactly when that counteroffensive is going to take place, but we did hear recently from the top military commander in this country who said that forces are ready for that counteroffensive at a, quote, high percentage. Savannah?
All right, Ellison, thank you so much, and please stay safe.
Welcome back. May is Nurses Month, and this morning, a new survey is showing a pretty dire situation that the nursing profession is in right now. According to alarming new data from AMH Healthcare, a major healthcare staffing company, nurses are saying the job is worse than it was 2 years ago at the height of the pandemic. According to that survey, 4 out of 5 nurses say they experience a great deal or a lot of stress. That's up 16 points from a similar report in 2021. That survey is showing more nurses are saying they're feeling emotionally drained and they're worried their job is affecting their own health. NBC News reporter Erica Edwards joins us now with a closer look at this data. Erica, good morning to you. So let's start with the nursing shortage the country is facing and has been facing. Some pretty shocking numbers right here. According to that survey, 9 in 10 nurses say the shortage is worse than it was 5 years ago. That's a 37-point increase from 2019. So do we know what is causing this shortage? Is it mostly pandemic related?
Good morning, Stephen. Well, yes, the pandemic certainly accelerated the exodus of nurses out of the medical field. As you said, it's really shocking numbers when you learn that nurses say that their stress levels now are higher than they were at the height of the pandemic. Remember, nurses are the ones who are most hands-on. They are the ones physically in the hospital rooms with the patients and their families. They're checking vital signs. They're giving shots. They're checking breathing tubes. That takes a toll both physically and mentally. In fact, more than a third of the nurses in the survey said that they never address their mental health concerns. Stephen?
Yes, so much emotional labor involved in their job. Erica, this survey also showing that younger nurses are actually more dissatisfied with their jobs than older nurses. Do we know what's going on here, why that is, and how could that affect the future of the profession?
It's a major concern. You know, nurses in their 20s were least likely to recommend the job to their peers. Remember, these nurses were just starting their careers when the pandemic hit, and the levels of stress right now just simply are not sustainable when you're looking at a long-term career. It was baby boomers and Gen Xers who are a little bit closer to retirement who were most likely to say that they were satisfied with their jobs. Stephen?
We're certainly outlining the problem here with this survey, but let's talk about solutions. What are nurses saying, if anything, can be done to help them reduce their stress and make them want to keep these jobs?
Yeah, in fact, nurses have been vocal about what they need in order to stay in this profession long term. Number one, reduce the number of patients each nurse cares for. Also, certainly increase salaries and give them more resources in the form of support staff. These are people who can assist nurses do maybe some of those administrative tasks. So nurses, so those men and women can focus more on patient care. Stephen.
Such an important topic. Thanks for helping us break down those numbers. Erica, appreciate it.
Well, it was a week ago when President Biden announced his re-election bid, almost a week ago. If he served a second term, he would be 86 years old by the time he leaves the White House. Well, as we mentioned earlier, even Biden poked fun at his age during Saturday night's White House Correspondents' Dinner. Well, as NBC News correspondent Dasha Burns explains, voters are expressing concerns about the age of their choices to run the country.
I will not make age an issue of this campaign.
In 1984, on a debate stage in Missouri, 73-year-old President Ronald Reagan, facing questions about his advanced age, delivered a line for the ages.
I am not going to exploit, for political purposes, my opponent's youth and inexperience.
4 decades later, and youth is not a word you would use to describe either leading presidential candidate.
This is not a time to be complacent. That's why I'm running for re-election.
President Biden kicking off his re-election campaign this week at age 80.
What's your biggest concern about him? I mean, definitely age. You know, I mean, it's not super in touch with, you know, such a large percentage of his base.
I think he's too old. I think we need some young blood in office.
These voters are not alone. 70% of Americans believe Mr. Biden should not run for re-election, according to a new NBC News poll. Among those voters who don't want him to run, more than 2/3 say his age is a factor.
Took a hard look at it before I decided to run. And I feel good. I feel excited about the prospects.
Republican presidential contender Nikki Haley delivered a sharp blow this week, saying she doesn't think the president will live to the end of a second term.
The idea that he would make it until 86 years old is not something that I think is likely.
The leading Republican candidate, former President Trump, is 76 years old himself.
What are the concerns health-wise as folks reach their late 70s and early to mid-80s?
As men and women age, we know that there are higher risk of dying from things such as heart attacks and strokes and other chronic diseases, heart failure, diabetes, high blood pressure. These all can increase exponentially as you age. It's not linear.
If President Biden were to win again, he would be 86 at the end of his second term. Only 7 presidents have lived past that age. And former President Trump would be 82 at the end of his second term.
I think they do the age thing because I'm 4 or 5 years behind. I know people that built their fortunes from 80 to 90.
Age is also an issue on Capitol Hill. The median age of Congress has been creeping up for years. Senators Dianne Feinstein and Chuck Grassley, both 89 years old, facing mounting criticism over their decisions to continue working. But while the current frontrunners for president aren't getting any younger, history tells us the pendulum swings.
Oftentimes, when you have one or more older presidents, it leads to Americans saying it would be a good thing to have someone young. Dwight Eisenhower, the oldest president in history, 70 years old, was succeeded by John Kennedy, the youngest elected president in history, at the age of 43.
Our thanks to Dasha Burns for that report. Well, the White House recently put out a spreadsheet showing President Biden's travel schedule so far this year, eclipsing a similar period for a much younger President Obama back in 2012. But certainly a conversation, especially when you see the polling numbers. We're back with some breaking news this morning. First Republic Bank has been taken over by federal regulators and sold to J.P. Morgan Chase. This comes after regulators spent the weekend trying to find a buyer for the bank.
Yeah, beginning today, 84 First Republic branches will reopen under J.P. Morgan Chase. This makes it now the third major bank to go under in less than 2 months. The First Republic closure has now become the second largest bank failure in U.S. history, surpassing Silicon Valley Bank. For more, we're joined by Barron's reporter Megan Casella. Megan, good morning to you. So at the time of the closure, First Republic had assets worth more than $229 billion, and that is even more than Silicon Valley, which had $209 billion at the time of its closure. So what are your takeaways here?
It's not an unfamiliar story, right? We're seeing this happen again, what we saw in March, that, depositors were spooked by some of that turmoil. They went to withdraw their money. This mid-sized bank had a large number of uninsured deposits, over $250,000. These depositors said, this isn't a too big to fail bank. I want to get my money out. we saw last week that there were signs of that happening, that First Republic had lost a huge number of its deposits. And so it was looking for outside help. We knew there was going to have to be an end to this story. And so federal regulators stepped in over the weekend. JP Morgan stepped in. They're hoping that this contains the crisis, but of course it does spook investors. But I will say government officials, federal regulators have emphasized that they do think that this is contained to a small number of banks that were not likely to see this spread.
So, Megan, what I think is also somewhat interesting to people, maybe raising some red flags, depending on who you are, where you have your money. This was a little bit more of a consumer bank, of a normal person who might have their money there. Not necessarily as big as a Wells Fargo or a Chase, but definitely not as sort of exclusive feeling as Silicon Valley Bank. What does this mean for somebody who has their money there?
I think, so all of those depositors are going to be safe. JP Morgan has taken over. They are now JP Morgan customers. And between JP Morgan and the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, all of that money is going to be safe. But of course, it spooks people. I think that's very understandable. First Republic was a big home lender too, and that was one of their problems, was that they had given out mortgages, doled out mortgages with really low interest rates that were losing their value as interest rates rose this year. So of course, customers are spooked. Regulators want them to know that their money is safe. They're really hoping that by stepping in the way that they did 2 months ago, by doing that again, that it sort of curbs any further deposit flight from this bank or any similar ones. They want you to know that your money is safe. But people are looking to move to those bigger banks that maybe have more capital on hand, wouldn't be as vulnerable to a bank run.
And even for people who aren't paying close attention to financial news, hearing about one closure after another, it starts to make people worry about the future of the industry. So what do we know about that future? Are there any other potential takeovers maybe looming here?
We don't know of any at this point, but we didn't know of Silicon Valley much before it happened, right? But, what we hear over and over from bank officials, from Federal Reserve officials and others at the FDIC is that they believe that this was a pretty unique subset of the banking industry. That First Republic is sort of an extension of what happened in March rather than a new wave. And so because of that, they think that now all three of those have been contained, have sort of been stabilized and taken over, and that hopefully there aren't any other shoes to drop. The caveat to that, though, is that the Federal Reserve is continuing to hike interest rates in its fight against inflation. And while they're not trying to destabilize the banking sector, that's a side effect. It's collateral damage in a way. And so they have done, and other regulators have done everything they can to shore up the banking sector. But it's possible we do see more weakness as they continue to raise rates.
Megan, let's quickly talk, we just have a little bit of time left, but about how this happened. I know you had written the Federal Reserve's internal review of Silicon Valley Bank's collapse earlier this year places the blame at the bank's board of directors, but the Fed also blames itself. Again, that's about SVB, not what we're seeing right now. What does that mean about how this happens? And thank you for the reassurance that you just said about this potentially not necessarily happening again or with one of these banks that we've all heard of before. But if that was able to happen, what does that tell us about the industry?
It means, what the Fed in that review is really worried about is that they have sort of taken their eye off the ball, that they have deregulated over the past 5 or so years, taken steps to loosen regulations in a bid to try to help banks out a little bit. But it looks like that they maybe have gone too far. That was the Fed's takeaway. They think they need new rules to try to make sure the banks are paying more attention.
All right, Megan, thanks so much for breaking that down for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Let's stay on your money now and some more financial headlines. An antitrust class action lawsuit is being filed against a major retailer and manufacturer over the cost of batteries.
Well, for that and more, CNBC's Silvana now joins us. Good morning, Silvana.
Steve and Savannah, good morning. Yeah, so Walmart and Energizer are being sued by consumers and retailers in 3 proposed antitrust class action cases. Now, they're accused of conspiring to raise prices of disposable batteries. The complaints allege Energizer agreed under pressure from Walmart to inflate prices for other retailers starting in June 2018 and require those chains not to undercut Walmart or risk being cut off. Now, the suits claim the scheme resulted in Energizer and Duracell charging higher prices. Together, they control 85% of the market. Walmart and Energizer have yet to respond. Subway comes up with a plan to clinch a more than $10 billion sale of the sandwich chain. Reuters reports the bankers running the auction process have given private equity firms bidding for the company roughly $5 billion in financing. Now, that could allow those firms to borrow enough to put together an attractive deal for Subway. Interest rates have risen since Subway announced it was exploring a sale in February, making debt more expensive and less available for buyout firms. And the Super Mario Brothers movie is the first film to top $1 billion in global box office receipts this year, and that's according to ComScore. Only 5 movies have crossed the billion-dollar threshold since the start of the pandemic. That was Avatar, Spider-Man: No Way Home, Top Gun: Maverick, Jurassic World: Dominion, and Mario Brothers. Overall, 52 movies have grossed more than $1 billion in history, guys. Now, my sister took my 5-year-old nephew to watch the Super Mario Brothers, and he is still talking about it.
Oh,
so.
It's just so cool, especially if it's something that you grew up playing and seeing to kind of have it come to life in that way. Same with, I bet, the universal little land they made is awesome. All right. Silvana, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
All right, well, you might have seen DINK videos taking over TikTok. Let's break down what that means. It's an acronym. Double, there's the D, income, no kids. DINK.
Yeah, and unlike all those family videos we see on our feed, some users are posting videos showing their lifestyle as kid-free couples, like these newlyweds who posted a video of them splurging on a recent Costco run.
Why is nobody talking about being dinks? Well, I'm freshly married and I'm going to talk about it. Here's our life as dinks in our early 30s. No shocker here, folks. Today we went to Costco. We don't have kids to feed, but we got lots of money to spend on goodies.
Money expert Kristen O'Keefe-Merrick joins us now to discuss the DINK lifestyle, which is controversial for some people. Kristen, thanks so much for being here. It's not
my pleasure.
It's not actually a new term, DINK, so
no.
we might actually know how it plays out in the long term. Do we know about financial advantages for DINKs?
Well, I mean, kids are really expensive, like insanely expensive, right? Like not just day-to-day feeding them, but sports and education, and don't get me started on how much college costs. So if you choose not to have kids, you can truly live a very elaborate, a fancy lifestyle.
So, I mean, first of all, I don't know why DINK, I'm having a hard time saying that word.
It's a fun word.
It's a weird word.
Yeah, I don't like it. I don't want to keep saying it. But, okay, so we were chatting at the top of the show, we are both DINKs, not something purposeful and certainly not something that we're showing our, snacking habits on TikTok or anything like that. But, we're both newlyweds, actually. We don't have kids at this point anyway. We both are in a partnership where both of the people in the partnership have jobs. So there we go. Double income, no kids. What do you recommend for people who, are actively making that choice? Maybe they don't plan to have kids with their money.
Right. Well, first of all, I don't know why it's controversial. Like, if you don't want to have kids,
I totally agree.
You do you. Like, it's not.
Maybe it's like people don't like seeing that they can buy so many snacks or
There's
something.
There's a little
but
bragging
it's like,
involved. I think that might be an issue. Yeah.
I think one of the big complaints or concerns is if you don't have kids, then you're going to die old and no one's going to be able to take care of you. I think that's seems to be the resounding when I'm like, why is this such a big thing for you? People are like, oh, because no one will take care of me when I'm old. Well, as a financial planner, I can tell you that if you choose not to have kids, you can be very purposeful about making sure that you save enough money to have that little nest egg to take care of you when you are old, right? So if you don't have to spend $1 million each to send your kid to college, then you can ideally save that money in a way that's meaningful and important for you down the road. Like, there's so many opportunities for you to live your best life without children and save and take care of yourself. In your old age. So if that's one of the concerns, then I've just dispelled that for you. I think a lot of this is societal, to be honest with you. It's like when I think about how my mother would react if I didn't have kids, like it's kind of one of those.
Yeah, I mean, not to make it too personal, but yeah, I just got married. It's the question everybody immediately starts
Everybody
asking
wants to know.
Are you having kids? It's like, geez, I don't know. In my head, I'm a kid, so give me a minute.
And once you have one, I found out from my sister, they start asking you when you're going to have another one. There's always expectations on you.
Also, sorry, I saw it there in that video with the dog. I was told this morning that I actually am something else. I'm not going to say it because I don't like any of these words, but double income, no kids with a dog. There you go.
Wow.
Spell it out for yourself.
That's
one of them.
Oh, wow.
I've heard.
A new acronym. I did want to ask quickly here, Kristen. She likes that, yeah. There's another question I wanted to ask you here. Just not a lot of time left. Taxes. I keep seeing this response when people post these DINK videos. People are like, you're going to have problems with your taxes. Is that at all a good reason to try to have kids for the tax benefits?
Absolutely not. There is no benefit to having children when it comes to your taxes. Like maybe there's like a child tax credit that's worth like society amount of money. Your kids are going to cost you way more than any tax credit you ever received. That's crazy. Don't make that a factor in your family planning.
Honey, we wanted you for a tax deduction.
You're a tax write-off.
I mean, look, I think part of what I like about this is it's normalizing the conversation about, you know, being married and not having kids, or not being married for that matter, not having kids. But of course, you know, it's to each their own. Obviously, kids in a family brings just a whole
I want
other
to
level
destigmatize not having children. If you don't have children, don't have children.
Yeah, exactly. Kristen, thank you so much. Interesting conversation. Good to see you.
Welcome back. This next story is a true picture of the phrase like father, like son. Chris Vaughn is the assistant director of college scouting for the Dallas Cowboys with more than 30 years of experience in the league. He has a lot of time in the draft room, but this day was pretty different. In an emotional moment, his son, Deuce Vaughn, was selected as a 6th-round NFL draft pick for the Dallas Cowboys. And Chris Vaughn got the chance to make that call and tell him the big news. Let's listen.
How's it going? Hey, it's going good. This is Dad. My phone wasn't working. Look at here, man. You want to come to work with me next week? I wouldn't mind that.
Oh my gosh.
That's so cool. Chris actually said he removed himself from the negotiations about his son, but they did let him make that phone call, and the decision was actually a surprise for both of them. Love that so much, Savannah.
That is so cool. Yeah, as we all know here, if you've been watching this show for a while, I am not very sporty, but love a story like that in the sports world. That is awesome. Very, very cool to see. Yeah, exactly. All right, well, now let's turn to our own sporty guy, Joe Fryer, and some Supercross. Well, it's a sport that's soaring in popularity. It involves these steep jumps and obstacles on a dirt bike around an indoor track. Well, Joe strapped on a helmet, thank goodness, and a jersey, and he took to the track.
Drop that gate, let's go! For these Supercross riders, the sandbox was simply a starter kit.
Look at these treacherous conditions.
This grown-up playground has extreme jumps.
He's loving it!
And wickedly sharp turns. Oh! All atop heaping piles of dirt.
Chase Sexton gets the win!
A lot of folks don't like dirt. You like dirt? We love dirt. We absolutely love dirt. I mean, we have this funny saying that we're dirty-faced kids.
For Ken Roxon, kid is a fitting description. He first rode a dirt bike when he was 2.5.
I've raced dirt bikes pretty much 95% of my life.
So was there ever any doubt that this is what you'd be doing as an adult?
My parents and myself, of course, we put our head towards becoming one of the best in the world pretty early on, actually, and we just started chasing our dreams.
Great one from Kickstart Kenny.
Today, he turns 29 and is one of the best in the world, hitting Supercross pay dirt.
I'm very lucky to be able to do what I love and call that my job as well.
Supercross is different from motocross, which takes place on longer outdoor courses, while Supercross tracks are shorter, built inside arenas. Last weekend's event was at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Crews covered the football field where the Jets and Giants play with sheets of plywood before hauling in about 500 truckloads of dirt, sculpting stupefying obstacles that can launch riders 35 feet into the air. It can be dangerous. In 2017, after a crash, Roxon nearly lost his left arm, but was determined to race again.
I mean, who doesn't like a good comeback story as well, right?
With that in mind,
it fit like a glove.
I decided to suit up and give it a shot. First, a lesson from Roxon.
Right side is your throttle. You have your front brake right here on your hand. And as you release this, give it a little bit of throttle. Perfect. Great. Perfect. Good job.
After a brief ride, it was time for the main event.
Releasing the throttle.
Riding in a straight line without stalling or falling.
I'm almost there. Woo!
You did awesome. And you even went through some ruts right there.
That was basically the equivalent of a jump, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
From beginning to end, it was just 22 seconds. Yet I'll always cherish that brief chance to flirt with the dirt.
God, what a bummer they had to cut out the shot of him
Right.
on the jump. You know,
Next
ran out of time for that. Yeah.
That's
All
right.
right, Joe. Thanks for that. Happy you came back in one piece. We applaud those skills. Well, Supercross runs from January to May each year with 17 rounds or races, one each week.
Very cool.
There you go.
All right, that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news, of course, continues right now. Good morning. Happy Monday. I am so happy to be with you. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Stephen Romo, in for Joe Fryer this morning. Also happy to be here. Right now on Morning News Now, into thin air, an all-out manhunt in Texas intensifying this morning. A team of hundreds of law enforcement officers are combing through an area just outside Houston looking for this 38-year-old man, Francisco Oropesa. He's suspected of gunning down 5 of his neighbors, including a 9-year-old child, after he was asked to stop shooting an AR-15 rifle outside his home. Federal officials now saying he's all but vanished.
We do not know. Right now, we have 0 leads.
We are on the ground with the very latest on that search, plus reaction from the community with more questions than answers. Underwater, more severe storms wreaking havoc across the country over the weekend as shocking new video emerges of a tornado flipping cars and throwing them, also downing trees in one Florida community. Plus, the latest from the banks of the Mississippi River as people up and down the Midwest brace for even more flooding. We're also following that daring rescue operation happening in Sudan as U.S. officials race to evacuate hundreds of Americans from the war-torn nation. How the government is working to get those people to safety. Plus, lights, camera, auction. Our own Joe Fryer has a look behind the scenes of how you can take home a piece of television history. Very cool. He gets all the cool assignments, Joe Fryer. Well, we do begin this hour with the latest on that manhunt that is still underway in Cleveland, Texas.
That's right. Over 200 law enforcement officials are searching for the man suspected of killing 5 people, execution style, they're saying, in their homes late Friday night. Local police say the attack began when the shooter's neighbor asked for him to stop shooting his gun in the front yard. NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson has the latest on this from Houston for us. Hey, Priscilla, good morning.
Savannah, Stephen, good morning. The FBI says they have no solid leads and are urging anyone with information about where the suspect might be to come forward. We spoke with the father of the youngest victim. He was heartbroken as the manhunt intensifies.
Right now, we have 0 leads.
This morning, the search for a man accused of killing 5 of his neighbors, including a 9-year-old child, is growing more urgent by the minute. Is there any danger to the community right now?
There's always a danger when you've got a guy that's just shot 5 people in the head, execution style.
Authorities are offering an $80,000 reward for any information leading to the arrest of 38-year-old Francisco Oropesa, as more than 250 officers comb the rural Cleveland, Texas community.
We're asking everyone for your help so we can bring this suspect, or this monster, I will call him, to justice.
The manhunt began late Friday after police say a neighbor allegedly asked the suspect to stop firing his AR-15 rifle outside because they were trying to put a baby to sleep. Moments later, a massacre unfolded.
This man takes it upon himself to walk out of his residence with a loaded AR-15, walk up into that man's house and start shooting.
5 people were killed, including 9-year-old Daniel Guzman and his mother, Sonia.
My heart is with this 8-year-old little boy. I don't care if he was here legally. I don't care if he was here illegally. He was in my county.
His father returned to the scene the next day, devastated and heartbroken.
Él murió porque quiere defender a su mamá.
Now telling NBC News his son died because he was trying to protect his mom, saying that the child saw her fall and ran toward her. 3 other children were also found at the scene, covered in blood but alive.
There was 2 females in the bedroom that were laying on top of juvenile children, in my opinion, to keep them children safe.
The community gathering to mourn, but still on edge. Do you believe he'll be caught?
Espero que sí.
And investigators say they feel strongly that the suspect may be trying to reach out to friends right now. They're hoping that $80,000 reward could lead to a tip. Stephen, Savannah.
All right, Priscilla Thompson, thank you so much.
Well, severe weather is again sweeping across the nation, causing serious damage and major flooding. In Iowa, the Mississippi River is spilling over its banks, flooding more homes and businesses. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch is in Davenport and joins us now with the latest on this troubling situation. Jesse, good morning.
Yes, Stephen, good morning. I'm right in the middle of downtown Davenport. Dry pavement over here, but you can hear that they've got a pump going, and they've put up a wall in the middle of literal Main Street. On the other side, what should be a roadway has essentially become an extension of the Mississippi River, and the water levels here are expected to keep rising after a wild weather weekend across the country.
With some neighborhoods already submerged, this morning the Mississippi River is still spilling over its banks around Davenport, Iowa. The floodwaters there are expected to keep rising until around midday, coming after a multi-state mess on the East Coast this weekend, with severe storms spawning destructive tornadoes. A twister ripping through Virginia Beach overnight, damaging up to 100 homes and leaving thousands in the dark. But thankfully, officials say no one was hurt, while Southeast Florida is recovering from this EF2 tornado.
Oh my God, this is like right.
The National Weather Service says the twister touched down near Palm Beach Saturday, with destructive winds gusting up to 130 miles per hour. Homes destroyed, cars tossed over, and trees ripped from the ground.
It's loud, it's scary, and lightning everywhere.
And communities back in the Midwest cleaning up and bracing for more flooding.
Kind of speechless. My first time down here during the flood, and just kind of riding it out with the neighbors, showing me what to do.
Near Davenport, some people are not taking the chance of trying to walk or drive in a car to their homes, even though this is a street. Because of so much flooding from the Mississippi River, instead, some people are going down this road by boat.
Some in the hard-hit area are ready to move.
So staying here is starting to hurt your livelihood.
It definitely is. We've lost a lot of product this year.
But others say it's not enough to make them leave their homes.
It's quiet, it's beautiful, and we get to wake up to that. We wouldn't change it. This is nothing for what we get.
Now, even though the water level is expected to peak here around midday, it won't really drop off much until tomorrow. And even then, we're expecting parts of the city to stay flooded through the weekend. Stephen?
All right, Jesse, we'll keep updated with you. We appreciate it.
And now let's get a check at your weather for the week ahead. Is this going to continue?
Yeah, let's bring in meteorologist Michelle Grossman with a look at that forecast. Got a lot of those May showers already, Michelle.
We do. We're going to have a lot of May flowers by the end of this month because we are damp all weekend long in many spots. And we're going to keep that rain in place not only today, but tomorrow, also Wednesday. I'll show you why. But let's look at the overall picture for today. We're looking at those showers in portions of the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, the Northeast. Also looking at some higher elevation snow. So we have some cold air working in. It's an area of low pressure that is spinning in that cold air. So we're looking up to 2 feet of snow in portions of the Great Lakes, the UP of Michigan, and even into portions of New England. The higher elevations could see some snow tomorrow. The Appalachians could see some snow as well. We're sunny and mild through the middle of the country. That's good news. The southern plains into the 80s, Texas. The southwest, we're into the 90s. Phoenix, we're going to be into the 90s there as well. Dry in the southwest. And then in the west, we're looking at record highs. So cooler in the east, 10 to 20 degrees below normal. The west, we're looking at temperatures 10 to 20 degrees above normal. That's going to continue to melt some snow. So we're going to see some flooding concerns there as well. Then as we go throughout Wednesday, sort of a repeat performance. We're still warm. We're pretty much dry for most of portions of the Intermountain West. Temperatures well above normal once again, 10 to 20 degrees above normal. And then we're pleasant throughout the Tennessee Valley, parts of the Ohio Valley. We're drying out there, the Great Lakes, also the Southeast, but we're still cool and wet in portions of the Northeast. That's because that area of low pressure will still be spinning over. So it's very slow to move as we head towards the next 3 days, and it will stay in place. We're going to start to dry towards the end of the work week and also bring those temperatures back up. This is Friday. This is good news. We're going to kick off the weekend with some drying conditions in the Northeast, New England, but look at heavy rain throughout portions of the Ohio Valley, the Tennessee Valley, also the Mississippi Valley, portions of the Gulf Coast. Into the Intermountain West, we have showers returning there. Also along the West Coast into portions of the Rockies, the Cascades, we're looking at the chance of some snow there. So speaking of snow, we do have the chance, and we're seeing snow falling. We're going to continue to see snow falling in parts of the UP and Michigan, parts of the Great Lakes. We do have a winter storm warning May 1st. That's where we're seeing the pink there. The white is a winter weather advisory. We have a winter storm warning also in portions of the Appalachians to the Northeast. We have flood watches. So all sorts of stuff going on as we head throughout this Monday. This is the reason why we have this area of low pressure just spinning in the same spot. So on this backside, we have really heavy wet snow, really cold air working in. So where you see the blue and the white is the heavier snow. You're seeing the rain also. The brighter colors are yellow, the reds, the oranges is where we're seeing that heaviest rain falling. And that's what we're going to continue to see throughout the day. Although portions of the Northeast, so New York City, we're going to see some drying conditions, and that's going to come back tomorrow. So you guys, you need the umbrella from time to time. We're going to get a little break today, this morning, but they return later on this afternoon and then wet Tuesday and Wednesday.
Oh, my goodness.
Did your hubby have a good time taking a little break from the weather?
Yes, we came back to the rain and 50 degrees.
Right back into it.
Yeah, got a little bit of a tan. Yeah, it was pretty fun. Yeah. The weather's not really going to compete with us.
Yeah,
here, no. Let's just say that.
And we can't compete with him either. So all around.
Exactly.
Michelle, thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Michelle. Good to see you. Well, today, May 1st, is known around the world as May Day, and it's become synonymous with the fight for better workers' rights. In France, unions plan to use the day to bolster those massive protests that have been going on for months now over the government's plan to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64. Chief Foreign Correspondent Richard Engel joins us now with why today's demonstrations could be the largest yet.
Protesters are gathering here in Paris. This is Place de la République, right in the heart of the city. And up to 1 million people are expected to gather here for May Day demonstrations. And not just Paris, all across the country. And it is all about the retirement age in this country. President Emmanuel Macron and his government about 2 weeks ago just passed through a bill, which is now a law, to change the retirement here, raising it from 62 to 64. And many French and unions in particular are outraged. And there is no date yet been set for the implementation of this change. And demonstrators want to block the implementation. And they want to block the implementation by causing so much havoc, so much difficulty for the government that the government blinks, changes course, and decides to scrap the plan altogether. No signs that the government has any intentions of doing that. And the demonstrators do have some weapons in their arsenal that they are using to try to force this change, to try and force the government to go back on its plans. And by the way, even at 64, France would still have one of the lowest retirement ages all across Europe. By contrast, the United States and many other countries have 67 as their retirement age. And what the unions here say they plan to do is to cut the electricity to the Cannes Film Festival, which is in about 2 weeks. That's something that the Power Union wants to do. They also want to cut electricity to the French Open about a month from now. And demonstrators say they will continue to block access to some of the construction sites where Olympic venues are being built before the 2024 Olympic Games. And it's not just activities on the ground. Air traffic controllers are demonstrating. So many flights in France have been canceled, and even some flights flying over France, flying through French airspace, have had to be canceled or diverted. And airlines are recommending that people, if they're coming to France or trying to travel anywhere near France, to check with their carriers first.
All right, Richard Engel, thank you so much.
Well, we're following the latest breaking news this morning. JP Morgan Chase has purchased First Republic Bank along with nearly all of the bank's assets and deposits.
Yeah, the news comes after it was announced earlier this morning First Republic was taken over by federal regulators. This is now the third major bank to go under in the past 2 months. Dozens of First Republic branches will now reopen as JP Morgan. Still no word on exactly when they'll get the signage. We were just talking about when they're going to look like a Chase Bank. But for the latest, we're joined by NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chang. Brian, always good to see you. So what should we know about this? How did we get to this point?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, the branding is going to have to change from First Republic to Chase after JP Morgan Chase was announced as the winner of bids that were taken over the weekend, solicited in part by the government to buy First Republic, which had essentially been struggling since the Silicon Valley Bank issues, you'll recall, from March. Now, what happened here? Again, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation came in, close the San Francisco-based bank and then flip the assets to JP Morgan, which means that even before the market opened today, they were able to essentially get the continuity of opening up to reassure depositors that the money would still be there as of this morning. So again, First Republic now effectively part of JP Morgan Chase.
Yeah, and that's the biggest question I keep seeing people have is like, what happens if you have an account at First Republic? Do you need to know anything about your money?
Yeah, well, I mean, essentially everything should be the same. There will be no change or any sort of concern about your money not being there because another bank is just going to take care of those accounts. Now, the migration of those accounts and, again, getting the branding up there is going to take a little bit of time. But if you needed to get access to your money, it would be completely uninterrupted, which was a concern going through the weekend, that if there couldn't be a resolution, maybe First Republic money wouldn't be there effective this morning. But again, because of this resolution, any sort of depositors at First Republic will have their money.
So I think a lot of people are like, another one? How many headlines are we going to see like this? A bank going under? Should you be concerned wherever your money is if it's not in cash under the mattress?
Yeah, well, it's an important point, Savannah, because after a Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank failed in mid-March, well, then no other bank failures happened in the weeks after that. So people were saying, well, maybe we got past the worst. And then here you have not only a third major bank failure, but now a bank failure that's even larger than Silicon Valley Bank.
And that regular people have their money in, not just tech executives.
Exactly, because most of those other banks that failed, a lot of those were really kind of more business-focused banks. This one has a lot more regular households, albeit higher net worth households in there. But for what it's worth, First Republic, they saw massive deposit outflows as people pulled their money out, something to the tune of 40% of their money going out in just the first few months. That's not happening at other banks. So if you don't bank with First Republic, again, it's not really necessarily the case that what we saw unfold over the weekend is going to happen to your bank as well.
All right. I feel a little bit better about it. Yeah. Thanks for breaking that down for us, Brian.
Thanks, Brian. Always good to see you.
Welcome back. And turning now to America's borders, as Title 42 is just days away from expiring. Many migrants are choosing to cross the border illegally before stricter policies begin. Border officials now worry they'll be overwhelmed with migrants with very few resources available to handle those they already have, much less the increase. NBC News correspondent Guad Vanegas has the latest.
Hundreds of migrants crossing daily on the Rio Grande. Officials say it's perhaps an indicator of what's to come ahead of the end of Title 42 after COVID restrictions are lifted across the country. Here at the Mexican border city of Matamoros, an encampment of primarily Venezuelan and Nicaraguan migrants prepares to cross the river. They use inflatable mattresses. Many, like this woman, with small children in tow. It's hard, but you have to try, she says. The rush accelerated by fear among migrants, with the Biden administration announcing stricter rules for entry as Title 42 is set to expire next month. A policy that since 2020 prevented migrants from getting into the U.S. at least 2.5 million times.
It's an approach focused on making migration more safe, orderly, and humane, and on advancing the interests of the American people.
Now the Biden administration is set to open migrant centers in Latin America with stiffer consequences for those who try to continue the journey illegally. With federal and local officials already stretched thin, Biden's domestic policy chief Susan Rice is announcing she will be stepping down next month. Rice had been key in advising the White House on immigration policy and tasked with creating a transition plan for when Title 42 would end. But along the border, the crisis has already begun. The Opportunity Center for the Homeless in El Paso at capacity and allowing hundreds of migrants to take shelter outside its facilities. A Department of Homeland Security official telling NBC News there's anxiety in the agency over current funding levels and the predicted rise in migration. DHS telling the White House it needs over $3 billion from Congress in order to have capacity for shelter, processing, and transport of migrants at the border.
Our thanks to Guad Vanegas reporting there. The mayor of El Paso, by the way, says that a state of emergency is being declared starting today. That's ahead of Title 42 actually being lifted. The city is expecting a huge influx of migrants, and that declaration will remain in effect for the next 7 days. Their city council will then decide whether or not they need to extend that order.
Well, Meet the Press took on Title 42 this week with Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas stopping by to discuss how the Biden administration is handling this surge of migrants. Here's moderator Chuck Todd.
Hello there, Savannah and Stephen. This week on Meet the Press, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, joined me to discuss President Biden's immigration policy. Title 42 set to expire in less than 2 weeks. How's the administration plan to handle a surge of migrants on the southern border? Well, here's what the secretary had to say.
This is a really tough challenge and has been, as we all recognize, for years and years. The president on day one delivered a solution. He delivered immigration reform legislation that we had hoped Congress would act on swiftly. They haven't. Within the constraints of a broken immigration system, we are doing so much. Our approach is to build lawful pathways, cut out the ruthless smugglers, deliver lawful pathways so people can access humanitarian relief without having to take the dangerous journey from their home countries. And at the same time, if they arrive at our southern border, in between ports of entry, we will deliver consequences.
There are 2 million asylum cases in the backlog right now. What happens to new asylum claims on May 12th? Do they get put in line behind these 2 million cases? Do they get, this is why the quick adjudication, I get it in theory. How is it going to work in practice when we're sitting on 2 million case backlog?
So we're going to focus on recent border crossers. But the fundamental point is we have more than 2 million cases in an immigration backlog that has been building year over year over year. What a powerful example of a completely broken immigration system. We have got to fix it. We need legislative reform.
You can see my full interview and a lot more at MeetThePress.com. You can also get more Meet the Press every single day right here at NBC News Now, every weekday at 4.
All right, Chuck, we'll tune in. Thank you so much. We are back with alarming new data that shows eating disorders among America's youth are more severe than ever before.
Yeah, troubling stuff here. We saw hospitalizations for eating disorders spike during the pandemic, but experts say eating disorders among teens remain at an all-time high, even though we've returned to in-person school, sports, and social activities.
Dr. Kelly Reglis, Project HEAL CCO and a certified eating disorder specialist, joins us now with more on this. Hi, Dr. Reglis. I'm so happy we are having this conversation. I just did a report recently also on boys and men with eating disorders, something that we don't talk about nearly enough. Let's start this off by taking a closer look at some numbers specifically. So according to a recent report from the data company Trillion Health, eating disorder-related health visits, I mean, look at this number on your screen, up 107% between 2018 and 2022 for those younger than 17. What do you think is behind this dramatic increase? Why is this happening?
I know, those are really heartbreaking numbers. I think there's a variety of factors that are behind the increase. The main one being, we can't ignore the pandemic and the impact that it had on the social lives of teenagers at a really critical point. And we also have to acknowledge that anxiety and depression were already risk factors for eating disorders. So when you take something like the pandemic that exacerbates anxiety and depression, it's going to make that incidence even higher. And we also, the other thing to think about is that in 2013, the diagnostic criteria for eating disorders was actually expanded to be able to actually include more people who were suffering. So that's also something to consider as we think about why these numbers have increased. Yes, eating disorders as a whole have increased, but we've also been able to diagnose more people effectively.
Well, that is good news. The more people can be diagnosed, more people can be treated. Something that I don't think is talked enough about is the symptoms that parents can actually watch out for. Do we know what you can tell parents? What should they be looking for their kids?
Yeah, I think parents should really look for marked changes in how their children relate to food. So a kid who used to love coming down for mom's home cooked meal is now bringing their own food to dinner or refusing to eat altogether, or their favorites are no longer acceptable because they're trying to get healthier, they're trying to get, eat a little bit cleaner, a little less junk food. Some of these things can sound really harmless in the beginning, but most eating disorders are harmless at the start. No teenager expects or wants to trigger an eating disorder, but they might have different risk factors that they're unaware of that make them more susceptible. So any big change in their food or how they move their body should be a really big sign for parents.
The other thing that we should talk about here is treatment and how it can be approached in a variety of different ways, because one of the things that I found in my reporting anyway is how difficult this can be to get treated, how difficult it is to get insurance to cover it. Another big problem, there are serious wait lists for a lot of these facilities that are specifically focused on treating eating disorders. What is available in the meantime, and also minority groups or people whose insurance isn't going to cover this, what options are available?
So there are a lot of options. Like you said, there are eating disorder treatment centers that, provide really great care, but there are barriers like insurance companies and long wait lists. To address those barriers, there are nonprofits like Project Heal that offer a variety of different services to help people get eating disorder treatment. So there's insurance navigation programs where somebody will help you talk to your insurance to see what they cover and to try and push them to cover things that they should cover. There are cash assistance programs where, at Project Heal, we will actually help people pay for the cost of their eating disorder treatment. And then there are, individual providers that specialize in eating disorder treatment where while you wait, you can work with an individual dietitian, an individual therapist or physician to help sort of keep you in check before you can get the treatment that you need.
And Doctor, we don't have a lot of time left here, but wanted to ask, before we can even get to treatment, how do parents even approach talking to their children about this? It can be difficult for them to even find a way to bring it up.
Absolutely. Gently is the best advice that I can give. Parents, don't be afraid to talk to your children about some changes that you're noticing, but also understand that one of the issues is that it's hard for teenagers to even see that it's happening when it's happening. So be gentle, be loving, but make sure that you talk to them about the changes that you're noticing and your concerns.
Absolutely. And I would just say one more plug for it. It can also happen to your boys. That was one of the most startling things that I learned, that I think a lot of parents, it got to a really bad point because they didn't even recognize that that's something that could happen to their son. Dr. Kelly Reglis, thank you so much. A really important conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Well, the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture recently unveiled a brand new exhibit. It's called Afrofuturism, a history of black futures. And it features cultural classics that have shaped the past, present, and future of African American life in the U.S. NBC News correspondent Zincle Asamoah has a look inside that exhibit.
Museums are known for showcasing the past.
What I love is seeing all the different costumes.
But for the next year, the National Museum of African American History and Culture in Washington, D.C. is taking audiences to the future with a new Afrofuturism exhibit.
What is Afrofuturism?
Well, I think it's a way of African Americans thinking about the past and its rich history and using that to talk about the present, but also to imagine a new future.
Museum Director Kevin Young says the exhibit was launched to reimagine, reinterpret, and reclaim the black experience. It includes African American classics, original costumes from productions like The Wiz, black stars like Janelle Monáe, and blockbuster films. But the exhibit isn't limited to fiction and folklore.
Then we also have Trayvon Martin's flight suit.
Among the most prominently featured exhibit items, an aviation suit once worn by Trayvon Martin, the 17-year-old unarmed black boy fatally shot by George Zimmerman in 2012. Zimmerman was charged but acquitted following a high-profile 2013 criminal trial. Martin's death largely viewed as the impetus for the Black Lives Matter movement, sparking protests around the country and world. I sat down with Martin's parents right before the exhibit opened.
So often with Black life, and even Trayvon's life, there's an emphasis on death. And yet, in this exhibit, we see some of Trayvon's aspirations in life. How do you want people to think about him when they see this suit?
When they see the suit, I want young little boys, teenagers, even grown men to realize that you can have that. It doesn't have to be just a dream. You can actually obtain that.
Martin, widely portrayed for wearing this hoodie, remembered by his parents wearing this, a symbol of his hope to work in aviation.
They'll see Trayvon more than the kid that got killed with a bag of Skittles and an iced tea.
I'm glad to see that even though Trayvon is in heaven resting, you know, his name lives on and his accomplishments lives on.
Martin's suit now placed squarely between symbols of black dreams. The Star Trek suit, Dreams Imagined, the flight suit of NASA's first black director, Dreams Realized, and Martin's suit, a dream deferred.
Looking at that piece, I can say from a father's standpoint that Trayvon Martin is woven into the fabric of the United States forever.
Martin's family and the museum team hoping this exhibit will reclaim black tragedy and history. Zincle Asamoah, NBC News, Washington, D.C.
And our thanks to Zincle for that report. Afrofuturism, a history of black futures, is open now until March 24th next year. Welcome back. The latest now from our AI Revolution series. President Biden made his official bid for re-election last week, and Republicans had something to say about it with the help of artificial intelligence. With this new technology on the rise, NBC News senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson has more on the major impact AI could have on this upcoming election.
The Republican National Committee using computer-generated video to show apocalyptic what-if scenarios for President Biden to be reelected.
It feels like the train is coming off the tracks.
But AI in politics is hardly hypothetical. It's here. From fake pictures of Donald Trump getting arrested to a fake video of President Biden instituting a military draft.
The recommended way forward will be to invoke the Selective Service Act.
Artificial intelligence, with its easily accessed voice cloning and face swapping tools, adding a new dimension to the political universe.
What I worry about in particular is that 2024 will be a GPT election. It will be the first time that these technologies are available in the context of an election, in the context of hundreds of millions of dollars, trying to push into the persuasion space.
In some ways, AI helps political operatives, making it easier to fundraise or communicate with voters. NBC News has learned the Democratic National Committee, for example, has experimented with drafting campaign emails using AI, according to a source familiar, who says a staffer still edits before anything's sent widely. Eric Wilson's a Republican digital strategist.
We're really excited about the potential for artificial intelligence to help make campaigns more interactive and to really free up campaign staff to hire better uses of their time, just like any other tool would.
Still, there's a dangerous downside to AI, the risk of disinformation.
And allowing Republicans to vote.
Take this computer-generated Elizabeth Warren, suggesting Republicans shouldn't be allowed to cast ballots.
It is necessary to restrict Republican voting in the 2024 election.
The senator never said that, but AI can make it easier for anyone, not just experts, to create fake content. To show you how simple it can be, we tried prompting one AI site with something ludicrous.
Politician kicking puppies.
But some strategists worry about what could happen when the lines blur around what's real and what's not.
To the extent that AI allows people who are trying to deceive people, to the extent that they can do that with better content, will be problematic.
New technology and a new political frontier. Hallie Jackson, NBC News, Washington.
A brand new world, Hallie, thanks. Well, some financial headlines now. And Twitter's former owner, current co-founder, Jack Dorsey, is finally sharing his thoughts on the social media platform's new leadership.
CNBC's Silvana now joins us now with that and more. Hey there, other money news. Hey, Silvana, good morning.
I've got the money news for you. All right, so Twitter co-founder and former CEO Jack Dorsey is taking Elon Musk to task over his leadership of the social media company. In a series of posts on his new platform, Blue Sky, Dorsey says it all went south and Musk should have walked away from the acquisition. Dorsey previously called Musk the singular solution to take over Twitter. Since buying it for $44 billion last October, Musk has cut hundreds of jobs and made policy and feature changes that have shaken the confidence and advertisers of advertisers and users. Apple is set to give its smartwatch a big overhaul, making widgets a core part of the device. Apple ditched widgets a few years after launching the original watch in 2015 in favor of highlighting notifications and multitasking. Bloomberg reports the redesign will let users scroll through a series of different widgets for activity, tracking weather, appointments, and more, rather than having them launch apps. And this could be an admission by Apple. An iPhone-like app format doesn't make sense on a watch, where you want as much information as possible with the least amount of searching for it. And the morning show will keep informing viewers for another season. The Apple TV Plus drama series has been renewed for a fourth season ahead of the premiere of season 3 this fall. Deadline reports that Apple is in talks with stars Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon, whose contracts are up at the end of the third season. They are expected to sign on, and there could be an option for a fifth season as well, guys.
I can't wait for season 3.
Can't wait.
I actually just watched this. A person in front of me on a plane was was watching it on an iPad with the captions on. So I'm sold on getting behind this.
Nice.
Yeah, like
that does not count as watching. You should
pretty
set
close.
yourself up on a couch with the sound
Please,
on.
yes, please actually sit and watch it.
Okay, so doctor's orders will do. Savannah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, now to the entertainment business news. An impending writer's strike threatening to shut down the TV and movie industry as writers and studios keep working to reach a new agreement. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer is in Los Angeles with more on this. A lot of people going to miss their TVs if this doesn't go well, Miguel.
Yeah, that's right, Stephen. Good morning. With less than 24 hours to make a deal and a strike already authorized, we could be on the brink of a massive writer strike for the first time in 15 years as the Writers Guild of America and major studios work to avoid turning Tinseltown dark.
Action!
With just hours left to reach a deal, TV and movie sets across the country may be forced to call cut as members of the Writers Guild of America threaten to go on strike.
It is going to have a massive ripple effect that you could borderline call a tsunami effect among the rest of Hollywood.
If a deal is not reached by tonight at midnight, some of your favorite programs, including late-night talk shows, will go dark. Even the fate of Saturday Night Live is on the line. This week's host, SNL alum Pete Davidson, unsure if the show will go on.
So I've been working on this for like 2-3 months, and they're like, yeah, well, we'll know Monday if it's happening or not.
The looming Hollywood shutdown comes after weeks of unsuccessful contract negotiations between the WGA and the Alliance, which represents more than 350 production companies.
We want more money. We want enough money to make a basic living doing what we love.
In a statement, the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers say its priority is the long-term health and stability of the industry, adding it is fully committed to reaching a mutually beneficial deal.
I think the only thing that is certain going into these last 24 hours is that neither side wants a strike.
But without an agreement, writers are ready to drop their pens and pick up picket signs for the first time since 2008.
No contract, no show.
Back then, that 100-day strike forced hit shows like Scrubs and The Office to cut their season short, costing Hollywood billions. While the full impact of this impending strike will depend on how long negotiations stall, it could force some network and streaming shows to delay the start of their seasons. To avoid leaving fans hanging, both sides need to act fast to write up a deal with a Hollywood ending.
There is still hope a deal can be reached tonight. The Writers Guild has a history of working right up until that midnight deadline to reach a deal. We're also told neither party wants a strike to happen because it could be devastating for both writers and studios, which are still trying to bounce back from the pandemic. Guys.
All right, Miguel, thanks for breaking that down for us.
All right, let's stay on this, talk about more at what is at stake. We're joined by Kevin Cloud, Chief Global Strategist at the Milken Institute. Kevin, good to see you. So, Hollywood has taken some hits recently. Obviously, just got back to work after COVID. It was an industry totally impacted by that. There's also been a lot of layoffs in this industry. What impact could a potential strike have? And when also would people at home, viewers, start to notice on their favorite shows, movies, things like Saturday Night Live, stuff like that?
Well, there are two different things here. The first is, yes, absolutely, the viewers will notice things almost immediately. If you're interested in late night can't happen without having writers working right up to the time with immediate guests, with people coming in and being booked almost up to the last moment. So for those of you who are looking at home waiting on Saturday Night Live, it's not going to happen if the strike is authorized and runs for the next few days. If you're looking and you're a big fan of anything in terms of the Tonight Show or anything else like that, it's not going to happen as soon as there's a strike, because the writers have to stop. They have to be immediately affected and taken by this right away. So that's very significant, important. But in terms of larger impacts, what we're really talking about is a disruption that can happen to schedules that can ripple out months. Not only are you talking about network shows who are still being written and trying to finish their seasons, but you're talking about affecting not only when streaming shows air, you're talking about when movies are ready to go and being filmed, and you can see this for a while.
And it goes even beyond that, right, Kevin? This is a huge industry. What kind of effect could a strike like this have on the wider economy?
Well, one of the things we actually found years ago when the last strike happened, for California, it was actually a very big deal because the 100-day strike affected not only the writers, but obviously everybody else involved in productions, including people you don't always think about, like dry cleaners and restaurateurs, and even people in real estate who might be selling a home to somebody in Hollywood or otherwise. And we actually found that when that strike happened, it helped to push California into recession ahead of the rest of the country. So it can be a really big deal, and not just in California, but obviously in New York, in Georgia, where a lot of filming takes place, and anywhere else that's directly affected by the industry. And it could have ripple effects for a whole bunch of different people in ancillary industries that are just tied into Hollywood, not just Hollywood itself.
Absolutely. All right. An interesting one that could affect people at home. Kevin Clouden of the Milken Institute. By the way, I'm heading out for your global conference to moderate some panels and do some interviews. So maybe I'll see you there this week. Thanks for joining us.
Looking forward to see you then.
Welcome back. This is sort of funny. After a long day at work, a woman in Ireland called a cab, just expecting a normal ride home. But this drive came with a little surprise. So get this. The cab driver had this flying friend along for the whole ride, a crow that you can see right there. Might look sort of normal, except for, listen to this. When the woman got out to the car, she said it was sitting on top of it when she went to get inside. And then as they were driving, the crow flew right beside the car for the whole drive. The cab driver said the crow does not belong to him, but it follows him everywhere. It's like some Snow White kind of stuff. Well, the driver even feeds him treats, and then he keeps extra snacks in the car for riders to join in on the fun. Look at this. The woman posted this video on TikTok, and it's already got more than 3 million views. I don't know. What do you? Aren't crows like kind of creepy?
Is
like
it a
do you
bad
want one
omen?
following you? Right. I don't know.
I think I tend to err on the side of that's pretty cool. You can feed a crow, take a cab ride.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
I guess.
Right. Thanks for that, Sebastian. The countdown of the coronation of King Charles, well, that is underway. We're learning some new details just released about how everything is supposed to play out on Saturday's historic celebration. NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter joins us now from London with the latest on this. And boy, Molly, they know how to put on a show.
Oh, this country does know how to put on a show. Steve and Savannah, good morning to you. That's right. Countdown is on. 5 more days. Final preparations are underway. And Buckingham Palace has been a flurry of activity this morning, even for a relatively scaled back affair. So smaller guest list, smaller procession. But for all the talk of a modern monarchy, including female priests, multiple faiths, really at the heart of this is a deeply traditional Christian service. And the nuts and bolts of it, very similar to back in 1953.
With just 5 days to go until the coronation, a massive rehearsal. Thousands of soldiers, sailors, and aviators all marching together in what will be Britain's biggest ceremonial military operation in 70 years. Of the 2 processions King Charles will take part in next Saturday, the largest, with all the pomp and circumstance this country does so well, will take place from Westminster Abbey back to Buckingham Palace.
It's a historic moment for the country, a tradition going on for 1,000 years.
Over the weekend, new details about the deeply religious service that will be held inside the famed Abbey. The 2,000-strong congregation will hail King Charles, who will use the same 700-year-old coronation chair as monarchs before him.
Charles will promise himself as monarch to the people, to the church. So it's an important moment for Charles. It's ultimately a solemn Christian ceremony.
And then, just like his mother's history-making televised coronation back in 1953, one moment will remain private, out of view of the cameras, the anointing. King Charles will be shielded by this ornate 3-sided screen as the Archbishop of Canterbury dabs holy oil on Charles's head, chest, and hands. Amen. The sovereign's orb, a symbol of his power derived from God, and the sovereign's scepter, representing the crown's power and governance, will be presented. And then the St. Edward's crown will be placed on Charles's head. Over the weekend, new photos released of the King and Queen at Buckingham Palace. A new BBC documentary also sharing rare and unseen footage of a young Prince Charles speaking about his family.
I like to think of us more as a family rather than a firm. I tend to think of
my family as very special people.
Reflecting on his fate as heir to the throne.
I ended up becoming heir to the throne aged 4.
And this week, Charles is looking forward to spending the historic occasion with his family, though one of his sons may only be here for a flying visit. This morning, reports suggest Prince Harry may leave the country shortly after his father's crowned. Meanwhile, the king and queen in waiting, marking their 12-year anniversary over the weekend, and their 3 children gearing up for a week in the spotlight.
Now, Stephen, there are a couple modern tweaks that are pretty interesting, and one of them is the public will, for the first time in history, be given an active role in the coronation. So instead of peers kneeling to pledge allegiance to the king, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Stephen, will invite the public, those actually in Westminster Abbey and around the world watching, to pledge allegiance to the king. Now, this is proving pretty controversial on this side of the pond, and of course, there are anti-monarchy critics who say this is tone-deaf, this is archaic, and they will refuse to join in. Stephen?
Fascinating stuff. Molly, thank you.
All right, we end this hour with a blast from the past. Our very own Joe Fryer got an exclusive look at a live auction selling some special pieces in TV history. Take a look.
Take one look at this sepia tone set, and you're transported back to the 70s and All in the Family.
Those were the days.
I want to have you enter the house, but could I ask you to take off your shoes?
Yes, we should do that.
Because this is the original carpet.
A precious piece of TV history that's still around today, thanks to collector James Commissar.
This lot comes with the actual porch, but this is such a famous doorway, 704 Hauser Street.
He's even got one of Archie Bunker's tattered chairs. The other is in the Smithsonian.
I wish I could let you sit in it, but first you have to buy it.
And soon you can buy it, the entire set from All in the Family.
This is his actual desk.
Or this one from The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Commissar actually got it from the king of late night himself.
So imagine the celebrity butts that grace that chair. It makes the mind reel. This was basically the most important real estate on the set.
He also has the place where everybody knows your name.
What's the story, Norm?
Thirsty guy walks into a bar. You finish it.
The bar once actually pumped out real beer.
Like a couple seasons into this, they found out we cannot give the actors real beer anymore because it affected their
acting abilities?
Yes, sir. Yes.
All of it is now on display at Heritage Auctions in Dallas.
It is the work of a lifetime.
Nearly 1,000 lots from the Commissar collection will go up for auction next month, from small props and costumes to those 3 entire sets.
So these things could end up in a museum or they could end up in someone's house?
Boy, I would be thrilled with both of them. I think equally it's about stewardship and it's about passing things to the next generation.
Commissar has been collecting these artifacts for 32 years and once dreamed of building a museum, but says that proved to be too tough.
I have to release these pieces back to the fans and to the collectors because they're the future of this stuff. They need to hold them and preserve them and elevate them.
I can tell it's not easy to say goodbye to these things.
As a collector, it's never easy to say goodbye, especially when it's en masse like this.
But the time has come, he says, to give TV's vibrant past an even better future.
Our thanks to Joe for that. Well, the full catalog will be unveiled for the first time this morning, and the live auction will take place the first week of June. Pretty cool.
Very cool stuff. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.